right. We heard from the former president his repeated allegations that this is a witch hunt. It is politically motivated. He went after the current president quite a bit by saying that these legal issues are all set up by Biden. This trial that brought him to New York today at issue whether he, his adult sons, and other members of his organization inflated improperly information about their assets to try and secure better rates on business loans. They were already found culpable in that, and now the judge could decide to fine Trump hundreds of millions of dollars, and potentially even more worrying for the Trump organization, stripping him of his ability to conduct business in New York, an action that the former president called today the business death penalty. All right, to help sort out fact from fiction, I want to bring in now CBS News legal contributor and Loyola Law School professor Jessica Levinson. Jessica, we heard a lot from the former president there. One of the things I want to get you to fact check for us. He said that the only witness that the state brought forward was Michael Cohen, and that they won this case already in the Court of Appeals. The boss of the judge already determined that he was victorious on this. Help us understand what Trump was talking about.
Not the entirety of this case. So there are a lot of different pieces of this case. And let's begin at the beginning, which is this judge granted summary judgment before the trial on a key part of this case, meaning he found that the Trump organization and Trump engaged in fraud. And so part of the big question, one of the big questions in this trial is how much will the Trump organization have to pay? Not was there fraud, not was there wrongdoing, but how much will you have to pay? There are other counts in this complaint, and those other counts are also at issue in trial. So in those counts where the judge didn't find summary judgment, then there's a question as to liability. As to this issue of the Court of Appeals, I believe what the former president is talking about, he mentioned the statute of limitations. So I think what he's referring to is the fact that there were originally charges against Ivanka Trump, and what the judges found, what the appellate court found, was that those particular charges were simply too old. And that's why she was a witness in the trial, but not a defendant in the trial. I will say that his language was, I think, purposefully broad, but in listening to what he was saying, my best assessment is that he's talking about those charges that were dropped against Ivanka because they were simply too old. Let's be clear, there has not been a finding by the appellate court that Trump and the Trump organization did not engage in fraud, or that these financial statements alleged to be fraudulent were somehow, in fact, truthful and accurate.
All right. Thanks for helping us sort out all of that. Trump has become very adept at counter-programming, even with the debates among his Republican primary challengers. He's been eschewing the debates in favor of holding his own events and controlling the mic. That's actually part of what's happening here as well. The prosecution is making their closing arguments right now at the same time that he is holding this press conference. Talk to us about both the legal strategy of doing that, whether that is likely to run afoul of the judge who ultimately is going to make this decision, or is it a PR calculus, really?
I think this is all about politics. And I think that Trump knows that this case is largely lost. And that's why when he took the witness stand, he didn't really testify. He went on this fairly lengthy attack of the judge, of the prosecutor, really a repeat of much of what we heard today. There wasn't a lot of specifics in his testimony. Now, that's not to say that clearly the attorney general is going to win on the rest of these counts. These are complicated counts, and there are issues dealing with valuation where some things are subjective. And so that's not to say this is a slam dunk, it's over. It's to say that on many of the counts, and that original count where the court already found against Trump, he knows that they're over. And what he's trying to do, I think, is really wage this PR war. That's why we see a press conference. And that's why we see this very consistent narrative of, I'm being attacked. I'm being attacked in the courts, and this is election interference. This is the only way that Democrats are going to win. And therefore, I think in conclusion, he's made a calculus that he's going to win more votes by holding these press conferences outside of courtrooms than he will in actually going to the Iowa State Fair, for instance.
And we did hear our own Robert Costa ask him about how much of his time is spent on these court cases, these legal cases, and how much is spent out on the campaign trail. And his response on that was that they're all intertwined, both in his mind and as part of the political strategy. So we are hearing a lot from the former president. Remarks outside of the courthouse. We thought that he wasn't going to be allowed to speak, and then the judge ultimately allowed him to speak during those closing arguments, in addition to this press conference. But I want to ask about the judge's decision. Initially, why deny him the ability to speak for closing arguments? And then why change your mind and allow him then to speak in the end?
So I think that the judge initially didn't think that Trump would actually confine his comments to the law and the facts. And that's what you heard this morning, where there was another request by Trump's attorneys that he be able to speak in the closing arguments. And the judge said, again, can you control your client? Can he confine himself to just talking about this case? And the judge said, okay, this is not how we do it, but go ahead. I think understanding that whether or not it's fair, he was going to face an enormous, he, meaning the judge, was going to face an enormous amount of criticism if he just did not allow Trump to speak in closing arguments. Let's remember that the former president has a microphone whenever he wants outside of the courtroom, that he's testified in this case. He's hardly been silenced, but we know that that would have been the argument if he couldn't speak in closing arguments. The argument would have been, this judge didn't allow me to state my case. And so I think that's why the judge felt, okay, let's give 5 minutes. I think the reporting indicates that Trump spent over a minute of those 5 minutes on one particular corner of the case dealing with his valuation of an apartment in Trump Tower, which, frankly, I don't think does an enormous amount to help his case.
All right, a lot happening in the political legal nexus. Jessica Levinson, thanks for following that. And we're going to probably be checking in with you on some of those other issues. We know the president's son, Hunter Biden, is also in court today. All right, thanks, Jessica.
Right. Thank you.